Welcome inside another edition of Frankly Hockey. I'm Kate Pettersen, joined by NHL insider Frank Seravalli. And Frank, no shortage of excitement over the weekend in the NHL. Macklin Celebrini helping the San Jose Sharks to their 8th win of the month, another multi-point effort. The kids are still rolling, and it was a ton of fun to watch NHL hockey this weekend. How was your weekend?
It was good. Lots of excitement here today. Some of you know I took over coaching a high school hockey program and first game today. So after months of anticipation and build up, excited to get to the rink this afternoon and get that season rolling. But man, you're right. There's no shortage of topics to talk about today from around the NHL as we close in on the traditional U.S. Thanksgiving check of the standings.
Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Minnesota Wild because they have been hot this month of November, 9-1-1 since the calendar flipped from October. And Frank, before we dive into some of the details, I want to ask you, is this sort of the reality of what you thought might be happening at the beginning of the season?
It's closer to it. Did I think that the Minnesota Wild would be 9-1-1 in November? They haven't trailed since November 7th and reeling off as many shutouts as they have been with Jesper Wallstedt in net. Not even like close. But if you had told me, I don't know, in the first week of October that the Wild would be in a playoff position and 12-7-4 as we close in on Thanksgiving, I'd say, yeah, that sounds about right. I thought the Wild would be a good team. It's the way that this season has unfolded that's been the biggest surprise because they started off so poorly. They were so over-reliant on Kirill Kaprizov, and they looked like a team with Philip Gustafsson struggling that really couldn't get out of its own way. They weren't cohesive. There was no connective tissue that strung together any parts of their game. And you look at them now and you're like, this team looks like it's had the same core together for years and years. And I mean, part of that is actually true, but the contributions that they've gotten, not just from Wallstedt, but someone like Danila Yurov and the way that this team has come together, it's been a very pleasant surprise. And they're right up there neck and neck with the Colorado Avalanche for best month of November, as the Avs still just can't lose. But this Wild team is firing on all cylinders, and they've been super impressive to watch.
Yeah, Wallstedt, third shutout in 4 starts. And I want to ask you about that tandem. How much pressure, when you said we talked about Gustafsson's slower start to the season, how much pressure does that take off him without having to have heavy reliance because of this performance of Wallstedt and him being so solid?
I'll tell you what, Kate, he's got to get his game together in short order. And he's trended in a better direction of late. But think about it this way. This is a guy that signed a significant extension before the season started. It's probably every GM's worst nightmare. Goaltending is voodoo. You never know what you're getting year to year, let alone month to month in a season. And so you sign this guy to a big ticket and then has a start to the season like he did. And you're like, hold on a second here. Am I going to get a guy that has a little bit of a carrot dangling at the end of the string? Is he going to be motivated to continue to perform? And then on the other end of that, you had Wallstedt, a guy who was promoted to the NHL in light of Marc-Andre Fleury's retirement. He was signed a big boy NHL contract to be a backup, but actually theoretically wasn't ready for the role. This guy struggled in the AHL last year, and now he's the guy that has sort of supported and supplanted Philip Gustafsson, who's on the bigger ticket. All of that said to say, I don't envision this continuing quite like it has. Wallstedt, 3 shutouts in his last 4 games. I mean, come on, we know that that's unrealistic.
Right.
But beyond that, they need Gustafsson to step up and carry the ball because I don't know that they can rely on Wallstedt all season long to play at any level close to this.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned Yurov, and I want to ask you about him because due to injury, he's been thrust in that top line center role, and he's been performing quite well. So what stood out to you about the way he's been able to produce?
Yeah, in the absence of Marco Rossi, he's been very impressive, not just from a production standpoint. It's not what he's doing on the score sheet. It's also the way that he's contributing and doing a lot of the dirty work for this team that's required. And maybe to be expected because that's how this Minnesota Wild team rolls. Joel Eriksson Ek is sort of the poster child for a guy who plays a complete game, is physical, is strong, is in the corners battling, making things happen. Urhoff has been, I'd say, when you look at his overall scope of his game, a very pleasant surprise in just the way that he's competed and battled. And that's what this team needs. And, you look at him sort of getting this opportunity. I don't know that anyone would have thought that heading in, that he'd be a guy that would stand up and look as good as he has.
Before we wrap, what's missing for this Minnesota Wild team?
Consistency, and they've had it this month, but they didn't have it to start the season. So when inevitably this run that they're on, 8-1-1, 9-1-1 in the month of November levels out, and you see their the negative start to the season that they had, what is the baseline of success for the Wild? What can they hang their hat on aside from these core tenets of competing and working hard? What can they rely on as what their B game is moving forward? You're not going to have that every night of the season. You're not going to be on a roll like they have been where they're shutting teams out left and right. So what is it that we can reasonably come to expect from the Minnesota Wild that isn't hot or cold? And that's the true mark of a team over an 82-game season.
Yeah, well, in perfect conversation about consistency, because a team that's been doing that is the Colorado Avalanche. Back-to-back shutouts over the weekend. Frank, they've only got one regulation loss in 22 games. How high is the ceiling for the Colorado Avalanche based on what you've seen so far?
I mean, the ceiling is Rocky Mountain high. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here for an Avs team that has shades of the Chicago Blackhawks coming out of that one lockout season when they started like 18-0-3. That's what this feels like. A run of sustained excellence that is so rare in today's NHL, to have one regulation loss through the first quarter of the season. Plus, like, we're beyond the quarter of the season. They did something that they've never done in franchise history before, and that's shut out an opponent on back-to-back days, not back-to-back games. For the first time ever in Colorado Avalanche history, they did not allow goals in 2 games played in a 48-hour stretch of time. Super impressive, and that is not just from a goaltending perspective, but also from a total team defense and commitment standpoint. I mean, you look at the way that they held the Chicago Blackhawks off on Sunday night. The Hawks were ready to play. The Hawks wanted to make a statement that they could hang with the top team in the league, and they looked pretty good for most of that game. But it's the Avs who prevail and find a way. And I think in the end, what Colorado really deserves a ton of credit for is that 1 year ago today, November 24th, 2024, the Colorado Avalanche had a completely different tandem in net. And it takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, we're going to hit the delete button and we're going to get rid of these 2 guys that we have in Alexander Georgiev and Justus Ananen, and we're going to trade them away and overhaul our entire tandem right in the middle of the season. And I thought it was a big risk at the time, and I don't think they had the playoff success that they wanted to in the postseason because they had changed up so many things. They had 11 new faces in their lineup on opening night of the playoffs compared to the regular season, and that's too much. But now you look at where this team stands with their tandem moving forward. If they didn't go out and add Scott Wedgwood and add Mackenzie Blackwood, who go back-to-back on these shutouts, I don't know where the Colorado Avalanche are, because they made the determination for once for all, we cannot win with what we have. And now you look back on it, Alexander Georgiev just cleared waivers and had his contract terminated over the weekend. He's heading back to Russia. No more, to not be seen again, probably in the NHL. And so to make that choice for guys that are on contracts to reshuffle the deck and go out and acquire Mackenzie Blackwood, that takes a ton of courage and foresight. And in the moment, I was like, man, Wedgwood, a little bit of a journeyman, and Blackwood had been all over the place. He was on the scrap heap in New Jersey with that heel injury a few years ago. To think that these 2 guys have now propelled Colorado to these heights, I think their front office staff, led by Chris McFarland, deserves a ton of credit.
Absolutely. And for Wedgwood, Is he making a strong case here to be a part of Team Canada in Milan?
He is for me, and this was the tweet from Paul Bissonnette, our guy Biz, on Sunday. He said, I mean, he's played his way into the Team Canada conversation. And I was laughing reading it because now with the way Wedgwood has sort of emerged on this national scale, and Jared Bednar has mentioned to publicly that Blackwood has some catching up to do to get to Wedgwood's level. If Doug Armstrong and Team Canada said at the beginning of this season that we want the best players and we want to take who's playing at the best, the highest level, and who's the hottest at that moment in time, never should that position be more a requirement than in net, where Team Canada has the weakest of their three positions. And so when you look at how poorly, in St. Louis that Jordan Binnington has played, and you look at some of the other guys that Team Canada has had on their list, my question would simply be, why not? And my question would be, go look at the replies when I was 11, not patting myself on the back, but 11 days ahead of Paul Bissonnette asking that question. I tweeted this on November 13th saying, hey, Scott Wedgwood has played his way into the conversation, and go read the replies. They're like, Frank, the only thing that Scott Wedgwood is in line for should be, you at the buffet line or something. And it's like, dude, all these comments and criticism keeps coming Scott Wedgwood's way. Just look at the numbers. Just look at a guy who has played head and shoulders above just about anyone so far in the NHL this season. One regulation loss in 17 games played and a .918 save percentage. You can't really play that much better than that. So for me, at the very least, Scott Wedgwood is the third goalie on my team. And I'm also taking Logan Thompson. And if you want to keep Jordan Binnington for his big game ability, great. But I don't think there's three Canadian goalies that have played better than Scott Wedgwood so far this year.
Yeah, definitely making a strong case, should be in the conversation. And you were ahead of the curve on that one, definitely with that 11-day edge. Okay, from the Avalanche to a former member of the Colorado Avalanche, Mikko Rantanen. Frank, ejected from his second game in 3 days. He gets that automatic 1-game suspension for the last incident. Walk us through the rule here and how we got to this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Any player who gets 2-game misconduct penalties before playing 41 consecutive games, so anytime within a 41 game span, a half season game span, you get chucked out of 2 games with a 5 and a 10, you get an automatic suspension. And in this case, for Mikko Rantanen, well-deserved, because I made this point last week on the show after the major penalty that he occurred in Dallas against the New York Islanders last Tuesday for this shove, which I think was partly caused by Scott Mayfield and the way that they had contact leading into it. But you look at this situation, and Alexander Romanov, the New York Islanders announced over the weekend, will miss 5 to 6 months with a shoulder injury. So you go, okay, Mikko Rantanen, not really that type of player. And I said as much. And then here's Saturday night in Calgary, where he just absolutely smokes Coronado into the boards. His face bounces off the dasher board. And I don't understand his thought process. I love his aggression. I love his physicality. He's a horse of a human who brings it on a night-to-night basis. But if you're staring down a player in the numbers, textbook 101, Canadian players have been wearing stop signs on their jerseys since minor hockey. If you see the stop sign, you better stop. It's no different at the NHL level. He made 0 attempt to turn Coronado. It was a well-deserved major penalty, and Coronado and the Flames are lucky that that injury wasn't worse. I thought this hit alone should have been worthy of a separate suspension. The fact that Mikko Rantanen only ends up with the 1-game suspension that's automatic, I think he's relatively lucky in this case, but he's got to find a way to clean it up, because there's a line. And it's great to play up to the line, but he's now crossed it twice in 3 games, and that's too much.
Right. And in the first case, they were saying the skate's getting tangled up. Maybe he couldn't have prevented it, but this case, a clear cut, not the way
you got lucky the first time.
That hit. Right. Exactly.
The second time around, that's squarely on you.
No excuse. Absolutely. All right. Well, on the topic of the Calgary Flames, I know there's probably some Flames fans who are a little bit disgruntled at the comments from President Don Maloney about the team's state right now. They're in 31st place, and I don't think it was what fans wanted to hear when they heard this statement from him?
He shouldn't be near a microphone. Point blank. I'm not kidding you. That was twice in a 1 week period of time between TV interviews and an on the record sit down with Eric Francis, both on Sportsnet, that have absolutely blown up in the Calgary Flames face. It's almost like they're listening to what the marketplace is saying and they're just throwing it out the window because they're pouring gasoline on the fire. And I don't understand it because Calgary Flame fans, for one, are too smart, and two, they're too passionate. So to come out and be as blind to what the marketplace is looking for and essentially spit in their face by saying what he said, and the theme and thought process of it, which has been, hey, we're not in a position where we're going to be dumping players just because fans want us to. And I understand the thought process of, hey, we want to have a winning environment, a culture where we want to not tell our young players that it's okay and permissible to lose. I get all those things, the core tenets of why people sort of rebuke the idea of a rebuild. But this year in particular, organically, you're 31st place in the league. Same personnel, same coach, same system, almost all of the same players from last year's team that competed for a playoff spot and missed it by a historical marker. They haven't been good enough. They can't score. Why do you feel the need to broadcast to everyone that you're going to hang on to these players? For what? What's the reasoning? What's the thought process? We need more cadres, not less. That's one of the quotes. Just a PR piece of advice for the Calgary Flames. Do not let Don Maloney near a microphone because he's sending the exact wrong message to your fan base and to everyone who is a passionate investor in what the Calgary Flames want to do next. The best, most clear direction for the Calgary Flames is to bottom out this year, and they might be able to do it organically, but guarantee yourself a top 5 pick. Get yourself one of the 5 franchise-changing players that are in this 2026 NHL draft and find a way to chart a path forward to your new building and Scotiabank Place with this young core intact. And this whole notion and idea, Kate, that Craig Conroy as their general manager doesn't have a contract extension beyond this season is ludicrous and malfeasance. It is totally and wholly inappropriate for the guy that's at the controls of this team to not have contract surety moving forward. The fact that we're well into the season and it hasn't happened yet, to me, is wrong. And second, it sends the wrong message. Oh, we need to chalk up a few more wins this season before we're willing to extend our general manager. What is it that the Flames would be looking for a guy who's done a lot of the great work already to get to this point, to position this team for the next 3 years? We're going to have him sit idle and wait? What good does that do? What message does that send to him? What message does that send to the team? What message does that send to the rest of the Calgary Flames front office? The sooner that Craig Conroy and the rest of the Calgary Flames staff don't have to report to Don Maloney is the sooner that the rest of this franchise will be better off.
Right. You mentioned the incoming draft class and the promise of a bright future with some of those potential candidates. So he did say, coaching staff, not rejigging it. Ryan Huska's job is safe. But he also said, we would be willing to make a trade if it was a really good deal for them long term. So what do you anticipate something like that looking like? Is there potential that we see a trade now that he said we're not bottoming out? Who would it be, and what kind of return do you think they're looking for it to be realistic with this mindset at the forefront?
Yeah. More mind-blowing commentary from the team president. We're willing to make a trade if it's good for us long term. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah. I mean, what are we doing here? Who's, like, again, I cannot stress enough, who is letting this guy around a microphone? Who's granting these interviews at the first quarter mark of the season? What's the thought process here? Because again, it flies in the face of everything that your marketplace wants. I can't imagine why on earth they trotted him out there the first time, and then the second time just absolutely blows my mind. It's malfeasance, And to continue along with this path, it doesn't make any sense to me that this is your messaging internally or externally, let alone the fact that this might significantly change over the next few months based on how this season alone plays out. And hoping, wishing, praying for more wins, it goes against, it's over. Mathematically, this team's not getting back into the playoff race. Allow it to be so and chart a path forward based on that. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And I know that your comments are echoed within the fan base for sure, especially if you take to Twitter and see those comments.
Get Craig Conroy a contract extension now. The fact that he doesn't have one is bananas.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump quickly to the Montreal Canadiens because they lock up Alexandre Texier after he was put on waivers by the St. Louis Blues. Frank, I think this is a no-brainer. Why was it important for them to do, and what can he add with a real low-risk move here?
Yeah, I'd say it's really no risk. You're assigning him to a 1-year, $1 million deal that's prorated. And look, I think Alex Texier's game has seen better days. I think there was a period of time in Columbus when I thought this guy might be on the precipice of putting something together. He's a high skilled player that needs to dig in more. And with that, let's see if he can find that opportunity in Montreal, where they were essentially seeking warm NHL ready bodies. And with that, they get one in Texier. And obviously confidence, opportunity, all those things were on the wrong side of the ledger in St. Louis. He asks to terminate the deal. The Montreal Canadiens hop on it, and it helps not just their NHL team, but also the Rocket in the AHL to better properly situate themselves right now from a lineup perspective, given all the injuries that they've had. I'm not convinced that Alexandre Texier is going to be a difference maker for this team. But in the here and now, with the moment in time that the Canadiens are in with the injuries that they have, I think he's in a spot where perhaps he can find that again and give them some of what they're looking for.
Right. Some of what they're looking for, but this is a team that's 3-4-3 in their last 10. What else are you hearing the Canadiens are realistically looking for? What is a big piece they could be going after?
Yeah, look, I think they're in a spot where they've been engaged in so many different conversations around the league. The center position stands out as a big one. It's not just a center that Kent Hughes has been calling about. They've got a surplus of defensemen. They've got more defensemen on the way that I think are really going to help this team, that they can deal from a position of strength. They're going to have to make the right choices as to who stays and who goes. And with that, can they find a way to support this team in the here and now? But I can tell you one thing for certain. The Montreal Canadiens are not going to make a deal to try and salvage this season. If it continues to go in the wrong direction, if they fall out of the playoff chase, you're not going to see a panic trade come. They've got a plan. They're sticking to it. And with that, the guideline that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton have set out here is, would we make this trade if we didn't have these injuries? Would we make this trade if we weren't in this position in the standings and with our recent play? With that as their compass, their guiding light, I think they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, contrary to the Calgary Flames, they have a compass, a guiding light, and a plan in place that seems to be sustainable for the long term. All right, well, we have him on our show once a week, so it's time to welcome in TSN analyst and director of scouting, Craig Button. Always brings us some great insight here on Frankly Hockey. Craig, how are you doing today?
Well, I just finished shoveling for an hour, Kate. We got about
no.
a foot of snow here in Calgary. So, and it's kind of in between. We usually get the fluffy snow that you can just kind of take your blower. Well, it was a little bit more wet today. So there was some sweat equity being put in this morning. But good news is I got my ski pass and I could be skiing as soon as later this week. I don't like to go early because of the rocks and the trees and the stumps. But with enough snow up there, I might just have to go take a look and see how my skis are feeling early in the season.
All right, well, we got to get some bang for our buck here before you head to the ski hill. I want to start by asking you about the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, a lot of injuries impacting them, but also some poor play. They fall to the 31st team in the NHL in the Calgary Flames 5-2. Is this rock bottom for the Vancouver Canucks?
I chuckle, and I don't chuckle to make fun of anything, right? I mean, it seems to be a question that is a forever question in Vancouver. What are they? Have they hit rock bottom? Are they rising up? What does the plan look like? Where are they headed? I know this is going to be really hard. They're a participant in the league right now. They go on the schedule, and every team gets to see, okay, we get the Vancouver Canucks coming into our building, or they get to go to Vancouver. Vancouver right now is irrelevant. They're an irrelevant team. And until they change what they want to be and try to become relevant, they're just going to remain the same. This is what they've been for the last 10 years, 12 years. And there's no signs that it's changing. I thought that they had a chance to be a playoff team this year. I really did. But after watching, I watched that game last night. I mean, back to back, you haven't played since Thursday. You got the Calgary Flames coming in, and that's the way you play? Sorry. Honestly, the Vancouver Canucks, if you look around the league and you give a does it matter meter, they're right at the bottom of the does it matter meter when it comes to relevance in the National Hockey League. And until they take a real serious look at what direction they want to be, nothing's going to change. They got some good young players. I do want to qualify that, but those good young players coming in and helping them are not here in the near future.
Okay, so I've been really critical of Elias Pettersson over the past 18 months, and some would say deservedly so. Some would say you've been too harsh, Frank. I thought we kind of saw a glimmer of hope here, a guy that appeared to be trending in the right direction over the last couple of weeks. What have you seen?
Yeah. It's always funny, Frank, and I don't say that funny. It's funny. We're talking about professional athletes being paid millions and millions of dollars. Ticket prices are high. TV and media companies are paying big dollars to think, oh my God, you're being too harsh on a player that's playing like garbage. 18 months, it has been dispassionate play by Elias Pettersson. I watched that game last night. Shorthanded goal against by Blake Coleman. Are you kidding me? That's the way you're going to play? And here's what's happened with Elias Pettersson. Because he's been so poor for 18 months that we look for these little glimmers. We look for, oh my God, it's like you turn on your Christmas lights. Oh, look, Christmas is coming. Elias Pettersson's looking good. 18 months, sorry. Elias Pettersson, you put a stake in the ice that says, right now, this is what I am. And if you can't take the heat and the criticism, then just bail out. Just get out. Because the bottom line is, I'm not backing off. I'm not going to get personal on a player or anything like that. But his play is subpar. His play is no good. And the Vancouver Canucks paid him to do a lot more, are counting on him to do a lot more, and he's not doing a lot more.
Craig, if you take a look on Twitter and do a quick scroll through the comments, it takes about 30 seconds to get that temperature check on the Canucks fan base. But I think to some of the moves that Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford have made over the last couple of years, and it seems like there's always this big hype up to the trade deadline, and then the moves don't really come in terms of those big moves, aside from dealing JT Miller and this big contract with Elias Pettersson. Do you think they're warranted in their distaste? Does Patrick Allvin need to do something big here and shake it up before it's too late with the way things might be going with Quinn Hughes?
Well, I mean, they traded JT Miller because he hurt too many people's feelings. He wanted to win, and he wasn't very happy with the effort of players. Listen, Connor Garland's the same way. I mean, he's a dyed-in-the-wool competitor. I mean, it's got to make him sick to watch what's going on. So is Quinn Hughes. And, we talk about the captain and he's a great player, Quinn Hughes. He's a great person. He's a great leader. Well, you're looking around and you're going, why would I want to stay here? Well, why would I? And again, that's on management. I don't know how many times over the years, Kate, I've heard this comment. Well, we're not sure if we can win with this team. I'm not so sure we can win with these players. Sometimes the players are looking around and going, I'm not so sure I can win within this organization. And I think that's where Quinn Hughes finds himself. So we know that, Quinn Hughes is a high-end player. I mean, bottom line is the only thing I would tell them to do, if you're trading Quinn Hughes, don't do what Nico Harrison did with the Dallas Mavericks. Make sure you canvass the league and get everybody involved to the greatest extent possible so you can get the greatest return. Don't just think that it's about New Jersey. And obviously we know the two brothers are playing there, but the Vancouver Canucks, if they're going to trade Quinn Hughes, you better canvass the entire league and make it a full-on bidding war because this guy is a great player.
Yeah, and I know teams in the Devil's own division that would be drooling to get their hands on Quinn Hughes, like so many other teams around the league. So maybe it feels a little bit premature to have this conversation now, as we haven't even gotten to U.S. Thanksgiving yet. But given that the Canucks have a better chance to win the lottery today than they do to make the playoffs, if you were in that chair as Jim Rutherford or Patrick Allvin, as you get closer to March, do you begin? A lot of people walk on eggshells when it comes to having a conversation like this one. Do you begin to have the conversation with Quinn Hughes and his representative as to whether or not the trade deadline makes sense to move him if they can get an indication as to what his future plans are? Or do you wait until the offseason to have that conversation and potentially canvass more teams?
Two things, Frank. I think you have to have the conversation with Quinn and or his representatives on a continuous basis. You want to make sure as a manager that you have a pulse of your team, the pulse of the players. I don't think you just say okay, we'll talk at American Thanksgiving. Hey, listen, it's great. Hope everything went well. We'll talk again in the new year. We'll talk at the trade. I think you got to be getting a pulse of what's happening. You want Quinn Hughes' input, not just on what his future plans may be, and maybe he just is going to be vague on it. But you also want to make sure you're getting his input on how he feels about the team, because that becomes really instructive for how you're trying to move forward. Frank and Kate, I'll be very clear here. Like, too many teams in this league and in all sports, they look at their team as they wished it would be, as they hoped it would be, instead of what it is. The Vancouver Canucks are going nowhere. Okay, I thought they'd be a playoff team. I'll qualify that. I'm wrong. They're going nowhere. Start setting the direction for where you want to be a year, 18 months, 2 years from now. Stop kidding yourself. Because that's all you're doing. And you know who you don't kid? You don't kid your fans.
Well, okay, that's the perfect segue then into this next part of the conversation, which I just kind of went on my rant about what Don Maloney said twice, doubled down, took it and doubled down again last week about, hey, we're not just going to be trading players away. Here's one of the quotes that he had. It's just too early for us to be throwing in the towel. There's never going to be a point where we're going to say, let's just get rid of every player that other teams want. Why on earth are they letting anyone with Don Maloney's thought process say that publicly to a fan base that is dying for this team to take a more proper path in this year of all years, where you're already at the bottom of the standings and a special draft class ahead? Why do this now? Why say it?
Yeah, it's interesting, Frank. And, you have ownership that's on board. Frank, this started 2 years ago. This didn't start like at the beginning of this season. They went on a path that said, okay, here's what it's going to look like. Here's what we're going to do. They had all those free agents. Craig Conroy came in. He did excellent work in terms of trading and trying to set up his franchise with first-round draft picks, with some prospects. And they have a really good prospect pool. Now, what you have a number one goaltender in Dustin Wolf. You have a potential number one defenseman in Zane Parekh. Now you're trying to find that forward that can be and this is where the draft is. So if you have a plan, and I know Murray Edwards really well. And Murray Edwards, the owner, says, if you have a plan, we're going to execute the plan. If we're going to change the plan, then we better have good reason for changing a plan midstream. And right now, there is no good reason for the Calgary Flames to change their plan. There's none. Like, you got a new building coming in 2027. You got good young players that are not just going to be young, they're going to be ready to play. Matvei Gridin, who was a late first round pick a couple years ago, like, he's lighting it up in the American Hockey League. He's going to be a really good player. And so you're not just saying, okay, well, we got a new building, we better start rebuilding. They've already been doing this. So I guess what I would say, Frank and Kate, is I'm not here to say let's celebrate where they're at. Let's not, but recognize that this is good. They're competitive. They're still at the bottom, which gives them the best chance or best chances to get a high draft pick, which gives them a real good opportunity to add an impact player that's going to help them in the future and that group of young prospects that they have. So to me, that's what you got to do. And Craig Conroy has demonstrated clearly, Frank, that he's patient, he's tough, he's going to make the right move for the franchise. So it's not about, do we need a player that'll come and help us right now? It's about a player or players, picks that are going to help us move the plan forward. That's what it is. And I agree with you. What are they waiting for? Craig Conroy not only deserves a contract extension, the question is what the hell are they waiting for?
Yeah, Craig, I was going to ask you that, a follow-up on Frank's statement there, and you said it right there. Craig Conroy, get that extension done and get that stability. I want to ask you about another team, though, that's struggling in the NHL, and that is the Nashville Predators. And it's a question of what are they waiting for? What do they need to do? Barry Trotz airing out his frustrations quite publicly. What do you think about the state of the Nashville Predators and where they can go realistically, especially right now with the cap situation and what they've got?
Barry Trotz should be airing his public frustrations on himself. This is his team that he constructed. This is, simply put, this is full on Barry Trotz. There's nobody else. So go out and state your public frustrations. It should start with, yeah, you know what? I'm really disappointed in myself. Fans should be really disappointed in our team because of the team that I haven't constructed very well. And they're going nowhere. They're like Vancouver. You better recognize where you're at, because the Nashville Predators, other than everybody loving to go to Nashville for a little bit of fun when they're visiting there as an NHL team, they're another team. They're a game on the schedule. That's all they are. So if you just want to be a game on the schedule, continue doing and being what you are. Because the Nashville Predators, until they recognize it's time for change, significant change, and I'm talking significant change. This is going nowhere fast on a turbo. And so if you want to continue on that path, it's just a dead end. And that's where they're at.
I mean, you could at least make the argument that if you had to pick one between teams of going nowhere, Vancouver or Nashville, I know which one I'm picking every day of the week. It's not even close. It's Vancouver. Not only is Nashville not in it, but they're also significantly older.
Oh, there's no question, Frank. I mean, like I just said, they're going nowhere fast on a turbo. That's where they're going.
The flip side of a team that's gone in the opposite direction, completely upward in this month of November, which we talked about off the top of the show, the Minnesota Wild. The big surprise for me is Jesper Wallstedt. For a guy that really struggled last year in the AHL, I thought that was one mark that you'd have to watch for this Wild team this season. Like, would Bill Guerin have to pick up the phone when it came to January or February and call Marc-Andre Fleury and say, are you willing to come out of retirement? Because I wasn't sure that he's ready for this stage, this moment right now. And he's completely picked up Philip Gustafsson, who signed a big deal, and for a big chunk of this season to start has struggled.
Frank, you and me did a project that I continue to be part of. I miss you being part of it too, for the record. The Core 4 Under 24, which really gives us a good look at what young players, what organizations have in those players that are under 24 that can really make up what I would call the pillars and the structure of your franchise going forward. And what I've learned here, Frank, and it comes also with Jesper Wallstedt, it also comes with Yaroslav Askarov. These are players that are clearly identified as number one potential starting goaltenders. And what we see with goaltenders is there's going to be a period of time where they hit those bumps on the road. Askarov hit it, Wallstedt hit it, but their abilities haven't changed. And I think that, you know, it might be a little bit easier with skaters, a little bit younger, but with goaltenders, I have to be a little bit more patient in terms of saying they are number ones. So he bumped and he had a little bit of a down season, but his abilities didn't change, and neither did Askarov. You look at what Askarov has done in November, and you look what Wallstedt has done in November, and we're talking about clear-cut number one goaltenders. The reason the San Jose Sharks are where they're at is because they've got great goaltending, and the Minnesota Wild have turned it around because Wallstedt has been simply tremendous. So I think that, you know, getting Zuccarello back has been important. Brodin back has been important. It's a competitive team in Minnesota. They're hard. No surprise there when Billy Guerin is your president and general manager, John Hines. But this is a good team, and right now the goaltending is backstopping them to a belief where, you know what, they may only need 2 goals to win a game, and I think they have a lot more in it. But they're comfortable with Wallstedt in the net now, and him and Askarov have been outstanding.
Yeah, crazy. 3 shutouts in the last 4 games for Wallstedt. Does any team regret being in that spot to pick someone like Wallstedt and bypassing him, trading out of it like the Edmonton Oilers do when they did in 2021 to get Xavier Bourgault?
Huge mistake. huge mistake. I mean, they were screaming for a goaltender. He was sitting there staring them right in the face, and they said, "No, no, no! It's an eclipse. We got to cover our eyes, or we'll be blinded."
I mean, they could have had a guy that played in their city too, in Sebastian Cossa. They didn't go with him. They didn't go with Wallstedt, and then they decided on Bourgault of all players.
Yeah, who's turned into what's he turned into? I don't even know. He's turned into Robbie Garventi.
All right, Craig, thank you so much for your analysis here. We love having you on. Always a fun time. And we look forward to chatting with you again next week.
Thanks, and I'll send you pictures of me on the ski hill if I get there at the end of the week.
Yeah, thank you for that. We'll look forward to it. All right, that was TSN analyst and director of scouting, Craig Button. All right, Frank, one word to describe Mitch Marner's miscue.
Oh, I can think of a lot. I might say silly, stupid. I think what I'm going to say is actually to be really kind to Cutter Gauthier, because this is a magical, not just read, but quick turnaround shot. I'm going to say unfortunate, because I don't know how many players in the league can actually do what Cutter Gauthier did in this sequence. It's not just batting it down and the read to know what Mitch Marner is going to try to do, but to be able to spin that quickly and put it in. Very impressive from Cutter Gauthier. And I would say with Mitch Marner, look, it's been a really interesting start to the season in Vegas. He's on track for his lowest point production in a non-COVID season. And the Vegas Golden Knights have paid a ton. The Vegas Golden Knights have been a relatively middling team since a hot start. And they've come back to earth, much like Mitch Marner has, in a pretty significant way.
Well, speaking of teams that have come back to earth, we talked about the Montreal Canadiens after a hot start to the season. But for Hashtag Hockey Today in the social media world, we're getting a mom's reaction here. But we've got to start with Florian Xhekaj here with this fight for the hat in his NHL debut. He did pick up a point in the game, but here he is out in front of the net. And you do see the reaction on the bench coming up here from his brother, Arbor, who is also on the Montreal Canadiens, but really getting in the action in his NHL debut. He spoke to Sportsnet after the game, and he was pretty nonchalant about the whole thing. A man of a few words when talking about his performance, but he does pick up the point. He gets his fight in his first game, and look at this reaction. His family there in the stands, but look at his brother on the bench. He had a good laugh when he saw the clip of that. But when we're talking about the fight, the reaction from his brother and his dad, a little bit different than the reaction from his mom. Of course, mom probably the level head in the family, worried about her son in the fight, just shaking her head, not having it. But that was a pretty funny moment in his NHL debut.
Stressful. I mean, look, the biggest thing I'm sure you're thinking of as a parent is not just, I hope my son has an awesome experience in his first NHL game. It's also, don't get hurt. And so there's no closer, easier way to get hurt than bare knuckle fisticuffs on the ice. And I totally understand a mom's reaction. This is the big leagues. These are the big boys. They mean business. And so, if you're going to drop the gloves, you don't get off easy just because you're in your first NHL game. So obviously the adrenaline helps carry him, and Florian brings a ton of energy. Much needed shot in the arm for the Canadiens, who, by the way, just beat a lifeless Toronto Maple Leaf team. Just, I don't know where the Leafs are going from here. We talked about a couple teams that are going nowhere fast. I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs are that far away from that conversation.
Yeah, the only saving grace is how log jammed the standings are, especially in the East and the Atlantic, but definitely need to dig in, turn things around, reinvent the wheel. So many different ways we can talk about it. All right, we take a look at the sports book every day here on Frankly Hockey. Frank, you've had a good run, not the last one, but what's the play today for people to put their money in a good spot?
Yeah, plus 6.4 units for the season. So we've been cooking. We've been in a good spot through the first 2 months of the season or so. And tonight, going with the Detroit Red Wings on the money line in New Jersey. We know the Devils are banged up. We know that they're a team that had been scuffling of late. They finished off their road trip with a thud. they're back on home ice, and I just don't know that the Devils should be this big of a favorite on home ice against the Wings. So a tad bit of value here. We're searching for it, always looking for value. And I think this game is very close to a coin flip. To get some plus money on the Wings, who have been playing really well, I'm going to go with plus 118 for the Wings on the money line in New Jersey this evening.
All right. Well, speaking of playing very well, the San Jose Sharks have been fun to watch. We talked about Macklin Celebrini's performance off the top of the show. So for our last word today, we're taking a look at the Shark Tank.
Yeah, and love this tweet from Brody Brazil, who just said, look, I've been coming here since 1993. I know the tank. The vibes are back. Didn't go without notice that SAP Center was sold out on back-to-back nights over the weekend. Huge for a team that was in the bottom 5 of the NHL in attendance over each of the last 6 seasons. So the Shark Tank used to be one of the most intimidating places to play in the league for decades. It was one of the toughest environments for any team to enter for their swing through Northern California. But for the last handful of years, it's been easy. And so to see Sharks fans come back to the tank to buy in again for a team that has so many exciting and talented young pieces that are in the lineup today that are really just starting to get rolling, from Askarov, who we talked about, all the way through to Macklin Celebrini at the top of it. I'm a buyer in what the San Jose Sharks stock is and where they're heading. If you're a Sharks fan in the Bay Area, you should be a buyer of season tickets, because that is one thing that's going to appreciate quite well over the next number of years, that opportunity to be in the tank. And I just love to see it get back on track, because it was such an awesome place to watch a game. And it has been like going to church for the last few years. 5,000, 6,000, 12,000 a night, empty seats. It looked like they were playing in front of an entire empty lower bowl. I love to see Sharks fans back at the tank.
Yeah, tough to look around there and see so many empty seats, loss after loss after loss, plenty of upside and excitement watching the San Jose Sharks this season. And as you mentioned, future is very bright. So get your tickets now before they become the hottest ticket in town. All right, Frank, we've got a 7-game slate tonight, so we'll have lots to talk about on our Tuesday morning with stories from around the NHL. Thank you for joining us here on Frankly Hockey, whether you're watching on X, YouTube, or on the Victory Plus app. We'll see you right back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central.